Rabbi and Mrs. Brodman, Rabbonim, Chazanim, Mr. Mayor, Alderman Frank van der Velde, the Mayoress, Mrs. van der Velde, Alderman Louis Kreiner and Mrs. Kreiner, dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the President, Executive and Committee of the United Orthodox Hebrew Congregation, may I extend a very warm and cordial welcome to you all, and to say how particularly glad we are to have so many of those ex-faithful members, as well as ex-chairmen and ex-committee members of the Vredehoek Shul present here today. May I make special reference to Cantor Joel Lichterman, who inherited and has been blessed with the magnificent musical qualities of his father, the late Cantor Jacob Lichterman. Today, I'm sure Joel is filled with wonderful, vivid memories. We also extend a warm and hearty welcome to his mother, Mrs. Miriam Lichterman, who is also present with us here today. A special tribute to Mr. Solly Rubin, who is the only ex-official of the shul, where he for so many years faithfully served as shamas with dignity and efficiency. Bless you, Mr. Rubin, and hope that you spend many more years with us in good health. This occasion is indeed a very sad, yet at the same time a very glorious occasion. So sad because today's event marks the end of a very important and significant era of history of Cape Town's Orthodox Jewish community, and yet very glorious and very special because it gives us the opportunity to reflect and acknowledge what tremendous and outstanding influences the Beit HaMidrash HaChodesh had in molding the character of Orthodox Jewish life in this time. This shul was for so many of us our true spiritual domain. On a personal note, may I just say that I celebrated my bar mitzvah here, was taught by both the late Rebbe Marcus and late Cantor Lichterman, and was also married in this beloved synagogue. Oh, how well I remember the exciting chagim that we regularly celebrate here together as one big, friendly and happy family. This I will cherish for the rest of my life. In its day, the Beit HaMidrash HaChodesh was considered and accepted as a center of prayer, of in-depth learning, of intense loving devotion to Jewish traditions and religious values. Eminent Rabbonim, the late Rabbis Mervish, Dushinsky, Marcus, occupied the pulpit, and renowned Chazanim, Cantor Rabinovitz, Cantor Kleimer, and of course the late Cantor Jacob Lichterman, who graced the Bima with glorious rendering of our traditional services. We are today closing this institution, but what will never cease to exist is the deep religious and Jewish traditional values and influences that emanated from this Beit HaMidrash HaChodesh, and that these will always form part and parcel of our Jewish lives in Cape Town. It is now my pleasure and privilege to invite our Rabbi, Rabbi Brodman, to deliver the introductory address. Rabbi Brodman, who in so short a space of time, together with his talented wife, have endeared themselves to us with their friendliness, great learning, humility, and willingness to help. Call on Rabbi Brodman.
Chief Rabbi, colleagues, the Honorable Mayor of Cape Town, Mr. Chairman, Executive Committee and friends. Ma tovo alecha Yaakov mishkanotecha Yisrael. How good are your tents, Jacob, your dwelling place, Israel. As we know, this statement was made by the prophet of the nations, Bilam. As our ancestors, our forefathers, traveled through the desert from Egypt to the promised land to Israel, he tried to curse, but found himself forced to bless the Jewish people. What did he see that compelled him to bless? And the rabbinical tradition is that he saw the houses of prayer and study. The tradition further states that all of his blessings turned eventually, in the course of our history, again into curses, as Bilam originally intended. Besides this one, Matovu Alecha Yaakov, and they base this on the prophetic expression, which is surprisingly stated in the singular. Indeed, it was the synagogues and study houses which became the greatest blessing for the Jewish people. Therein, we were reminded of our roots, our tradition, and our destiny. In them, we remain faithful to our people and our heritage. Today, we again find ourselves at a crossroad, taking leave of a synagogue which has so faithfully and intensively been a vehicle of this blessing for many generations of Jews in Cape Town. The Vredehoek Shul has been, as the name says it, a corner of peace. Here, thousands of Jews have found peace of mind. Here they have experienced the feeling of closeness to the Shekhinah, to the Almighty, the presence of Hashem, and that in times of happiness and joy, as in times of sadness and sorrow. Here they studied Torah, which brought them into contact with the great teachings of our Torah and sages. Here they prepare themselves and their families for an ethical and high standard of Jewish life. Generations of rabbis have shown this congregation in this shul how to live as Jews and how to find comfort and spiritual strength through prayer and study. Today, the 8th of August, the 21st of the month of Av, we take leave, as we have done time after time in Jewish history, of a spiritual center in order to move to another one. We do this partly with pain in our hearts, but more so with the conviction that we take leave only of the material aspect, the stone and the wood, but the spirit of this shul we take with us into the Skunder Street shul. We pay tribute to this great place of religious experiences and pray to the Almighty, to Hashem, that we should be able to transfer the blessing of Matovu Alecha Yaakov, how good are you tents of Jacob, to the synagogues of the Jewish community of Cape Town, where we will find peace for our community, our Kehillah, stable peace for all the inhabitants of Cape Town and South Africa, and everlasting peace for the state of Israel. Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi Brodman, for a very special and interesting address. I now call upon our Chief Rabbi, Rabbi Cyril Harris, to deliver the keynote address.
The text in decoration above the Aron Kodesh of the old synagogue in Constitution Street was again adopted for the Bet HaMidrash Hechadash when it was new in Vredehoek. Ki lekach tov natati lachem. I give you good doctrine, Torati al ta'azogo. Therefore, do not forsake my Torah. The Kli Yakar has a penetrating and intensely beautiful insight into an apparent mistake in this very well-known phrase. It should not say Ki lekach tov natati lachem, because lakach comes from the Hebrew, it means to take, and natati means to give. It should say Ki matana tova natati lachem. I give you a good gift. How can you give someone a good taking? He gives some beautiful answers. When we give to charity, we give, but we take a warmth of heart, a consciousness that we have performed a good deed. We feel good about it. We give and we feel good. When a teacher gives to a pupil knowledge, understanding, insights, trying to probe with the intellect, and the pupil understands, and the pupil's eyes are illuminated by the knowledge, and the pupil asks good questions. So the teacher has given, but the teacher takes. The teacher sheps nachas. The pupil has actually understood. 2 Sundays ago, that horrendous massacre at St. James's, Kenilworth, when the courageous mayor of Cape Town led Cape Town and the country in giving comfort and consolation. And hopefully all of us took some lesson from that about the true new South Africa, which will be built on compassion and kindness, not on horror and hatred. Acts, gestures of love extended to the families of the bereaved. That every time we give, in the very act of giving, we also take. And the reason Almighty God says, I give you a good taking, is that God gave us His most precious gift, His Torah, God's own knowledge on how to behave. And when we love that Torah, when we study that Torah, when we keep that Torah, when that Torah is the mainspring of our lives, then God Himself, as it were, smiles. Ki lekach tov. Hashem Yisborach takes nachas from our efforts, and it's how God, even with God, He gives, but He takes joy in the knowledge of the acceptance of that gift. Today also we salute all those who have given to this magnificent synagogue. A building which, as dear Rabbi Brotman has said, has just been more than bricks and mortar. This synagogue, which for decades has stood for the highest standards of Yiddishkeit, of Torah learning and of Torah practice. We salute the pious rabbis who had the privilege of serving here. Great Torah personalities. Rabbi Mervish, Rabbi Dushinsky, Rabbi Marcus, Zichronam Livracha, may their memory be a blessing. Great cantors, sweet singers. Chazan Rabinovich, Chazan Lichterman. Fortunately, the Yerusha is still very much with us in Cape Town. Lay leaders utterly devoted to the task. Chairman after chairman. They thought of nothing except the well-being of this synagogue. Secretaries, shamosim, hundreds, thousands of voluntary workers. All those who've given. So that today we take a sense of satisfaction of a job well done. When we open a show, we ask that the Shekhinah, God's presence, should be with us. When we close a show, we ask for God's presence to be with us. That wherever we go, may it follow us around, God with his blessings. So this is a sad occasion, but it's tinged with the great knowledge and a deep sense of gratitude for everyone who made Vredehoek an example to every synagogue in South Africa. We must all feel old when the Beit HaMidrash Hadash becomes the Beit HaMidrash Hayashan. But new things, there's no such thing as modern antiques, but all new things, unfortunately, become old. And the very walls here, steeped in prayer and steeped in learning, and today is sad and yet happy that that opportunity was given, all these great people, that they all seized the opportunity, and the consciousness of a job well done is what we have with us today. The synagogue of our formative years always leaves an indelible impression on us. Each of us, all Jewish men and all Jewish ladies, we are what we are because of the synagogue of our youth. And although we moved on far from that synagogue, yet the preciousness of it to our hearts, to our spirituality, to our Jewish identity, to all that we mean by faith, it never ever leaves us. God is good, and he gives us a video in our mind and in our heart. We close our eyes and we go back over the years. And I know that the devoted members of Vredehoek who are here today, they're not really with us just today. They've gone back, as has been mentioned, to a bar mitzvah, to a wedding, to a celebration of Yom Tov, to fasting together on Yom Kippur, to the old, familiar, half-forgotten faces who used to occupy the front row seats, to all the personalities that made the synagogue a joy and something of moment. And we travel back on the wings of time in order to go back to our roots, which mean so very, very much to us. The Israeli kibbutz agriculturalist Moti Tzur says that roots are always important. He taught some of his young pupils about roots, except for one young girl who planted a sapling, and every morning she would lift it out and have a look at the roots to see if they were okay, and put it back in the ground again, and was very upset when it didn't grow. That's the only example of roots not working. Our roots go back a long time. And the Vredehoek roots go back to 1898, nearly a century filled with teeming Jewish life, a century filled with Yiddishkeit. I was astounded and yet pleasantly surprised to read of the conditions which the first Chevra Shas, Chevra Gemara, implemented here in Vredehoek. It was to do with Hasmodah. You have a Chevra Gemara, you have to learn every day, preferably morning and evening, and many of them did. And you had to, when you signed up on this Chevra Gemara here, Vredehoek, from 1898, you had to agree to come morning and evening for a shir. The minimum that was allowed, if you were very, very busy and your business, thank God, took off, you had to attend twice a week. If business was really good, they allowed you off coming only to the special shir and Shabbos. If you didn't appear like a Havdale, somebody who's a member of a golf club and is always drinking at the 19th rather than playing a golf. If you didn't appear at the Shiurim for 2-3 weeks in a row, then the current chairman took you aside after the bracha when he caught you on Shabbos morning and said, "Excuse me, we don't want you anymore. The idea of this is to learn." Oi, and how they learn. Have a look at these Sephorim on your way out. These beautiful books at the back there. There's not one of them new. A new Gemara, a new Mishnah, something you give a little key. They're very well thumbed, because these walls are not only steeped in prayer, they are steeped in learning. And the highest level of Torah study and Talmudical expertise was exercised by the Rabbonim and the Melamdim and the Magidei Shir in Vredehoek. So that everyone in Cape Town knew a Shir in Vredehoek, a daily Shir, a morning and an evening Shir, twice a day, was something which was keeping the flag of Jewish learning proudly flying. And when it came to the Chevra Mishnah, they had another rule. They said that if you want to learn Mishnah with us, you have to keep Shabbos. That we're not learning some things and not keeping them. We are practicing what we preach. And therefore, enshrined in their rules, very significant for us at a time when to be a member of a synagogue means all you have to do is prove you're Jewish and hopefully pay your membership subscription. This Chevra Mishnah, they said when you come here to learn Mishnah, you'll be a Shomer Shabbos. And these rules transcend the norm, and they're part of the fabric of the Vredehoek history, which has made it such a grandiose show in every sense, and makes our hearts bleed that it has come to an end now. But it's not quite an end, is it? The page of history has closed, one page. But those of yesteryear, not so long ago, the early 1980s, had the very good sense to amalgamate with personalities who had equal seichel up the road in Skunda Street to form the United Orthodox Hebrew Congregation. Amalgamations are difficult things. Amalgamations in some circumstances are essential things. And while we weep at the demise of this show, we rejoice at the fact that although the synagogue building is closing, synagogue itself, in the sense of a live community, still very, very much part of the United Orthodox Hebrew Congregation. And how one hopes that a similar measure of common sense and maturity in facing up to reality will apply to very many other instances of the necessity of combining forces and amalgamating. The traditions of Vredehoek, its ideas, its concepts, and its values continue up the road under the wonderful spiritual leadership of our dear colleague Rabbi Brockman, whose enthusiasm is boundless, who is never ever known to be depressed or despondent, who always got an answer. And together with his dear life partner, they're a wonderful couple and a wonderful example of Jewish family life and Jewish spiritual leadership. The past doesn't die as long as there is spiritual continuity. As long as the spiritual continuity is maintained, the community, which is only ever its accumulated past, goes on. And Vredehoek will continue to provide for Cape Town Jewry the motive power to continue Yiddishkeit at an admirable level. There's one more apparent mistake in the Menucha Yoma. Towards the end, Torah is a tree of life to those who are machzik, those who embrace it, those who hug it. Machzik, Eitz Chaim and Machzik, but Tomacheha Me'ushar, Tomacheha is plural. All those who uphold it, so it shouldn't be Me'ushar, it should be Me'usharim. But Tomacheha, it says Me'ushar. It's a promise. Oh my God, it's what? All those who uphold Torah, each and every one of them will be happy. Me'ushar. Deliberately goes from the plural into the singular. Nobody is left out. Nobody ever worked for Torah, who loved Torah, who kept Torah, who built a synagogue like this with their sweat and tears, their pride, their devotion, their knowledge of Yiddishkeit, their desire to hand on to other generations what it really means to be Jewish. Nobody was ever left out. No matter what winds were blowing, no matter what storms were around, no matter what problems in the outside world, v'tomacheha me'ushar, each and every one who has upheld the Torah has been happy, has been blessed with happiness. And that is what we pray for the wonderful Vredehoek show, which, alas, from today ceases to exist. But the influence of Vredehoek will, please God, go on for years and years as a true blessing to wonderful Cape Town Jewry. Amen.
Rabbi Harris, Rabbi Broadman, Mrs. Broadman, Rabonim, Hazonim, His Worshipful the Mayor, Frank van der Velde, the Mayoress, Alderman Lee Craner, Mrs. Craner, honored guest, ladies and gentlemen, and my dear fellow congregants. In his foreword to the book, The Birth of a Community, by the late Chief Rabbi Professor Israel Abrams of blessed memory, the late Dr. D.F. Malang, then Prime Minister of the Union of South Africa, said inter alia the following of the Jews. In two important respects, the Jewish race is decidedly unique, such even to an extent bordering on the miraculous. The first is the maintenance of their racial identity for almost 2,000 years, in spite of their having no homeland and no other central uniting authority, and more especially in spite of the dispersion among practically all the other nations of the world. Actually, this has never occurred in the case of any other nation, nor can it even be imagined to be possible. The second is the amazing adaptability of the Jewish race, which makes it possible for them to fit themselves into the national structure of various countries in which they happen to live. We as Jews know that as early as 586 BCE, when Jerusalem and the temple fell, the Babylonian conquerors led many Judeans away from their homes, their fields and their cities to the distant land of Babylonia. Other nations had been led to strange lands, and they had disappeared, leaving no trace behind them. But the Judeans remained to tell the story. Driven from their soil, they still remained faithful and loyal to that ancient homeland and all that it meant for them. One can imagine the despair which must have haunted our forefathers who lived at the time of that terrible destruction by the armies of Babylon. The psalmist has depicted the mood of these people in the very well-known Psalm 137. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, yea, we wept, when we remembered Zion. Upon the willows in the midst thereof, we hanged up our harps. For there they that led us kept us captive asked of us words of song, and our tormentors asked of us mirth. Sing us one of the songs of Zion. How shall we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget her cunning. Let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. If I remember thee not, if I set not Jerusalem above my chiefest joy. In Babylon, the Jewish exiles soon found themselves surrounded by glittering temptations and allurements. The challenges posed by that world metropolis were great. Captives from other nations conquered by Babylon found it easy to assimilate and were in fact quickly lost. But the Torah was an inner fortress and fastness which united the Jewish exiles, gave them an identity of their own, and demanded unanswering faithfulness. Nearly 100 years ago, the Jewish community of Chait had been confronted by the sudden wartime expansion of its numbers. This tremendous increase in numbers was a challenge to the leaders. In certain quarters it was held that the time had come to make permanent provision for the enlarged religious needs of Cape Town. Here was now the opportunity of realizing an ambition to erect a fitting place of worship for a congregation conducting in the East European tradition. Accordingly, the Minyan that had for some time been holding services on Shabbat and festivals in a room in Vredehoek Street, a handful of Lithuanian immigrants convened a meeting at which a resolution was taken to establish a new synagogue to be known as the New Hebrew Congregation, which led in 1902 the first shul and the consecration of the Roland Street Synagogue. The New Hebrew Congregation could not, by the nature of things, satisfy the entire Orthodox element. This element consisted of several groups. The dividing line between them mostly amounted to nothing more than a difference of Landmannschaft, each group consisting of Landslight, sharing common childhood memories. Soon these Orthodox subsections established their separate houses of prayer and study. And thus came into being, about this time, the Beit HaMidrash HaChodesh in Constitution Street, the Beit HaMidrash the Ponevis in Maynard Street, and the Hebrew Congregation Chabad, originally in Butington Street, then at 22 Virginia Avenue, and finally transferred to 31 Arthur's Road, Seapoint. It is interesting to note that after being in existence for 50 years, the Roland Street Shul was demolished and the Schoonde Street was built in its place instead. So too, it was felt that the Beit HaMidrash, mainly because of the shift of the Jewish population from the original residential area around the synagogue at 38 Constitution Street, be moved to a more suitable part of the town. The foundation stone was laid by Mr. Wolf Harris on the 8th of January 1939, and the new Beit HaMidrash was officially opened here on the corner of Butington Street, Ragley Road, and Justice Street, the present Rabbi Murphy's Avenue. So it came to pass that two important congregations, the Beit HaMidrash HaChodesh and the Beit HaKnesset Tiferet Israel, because of the size of the Jewish community of the area at the time, and the need for centers around which all the vital activities of migrating and pioneering communities could revolve in the field of worship, study, and social life, side by side played an important role and provided for the spiritual needs of their respective congregations. Then, 10 years ago, mainly because of the moving of the Jewish families from this area to suburbs like Seapoint, Claremont, Constantia, as well as families immigrating, it became necessary to unite. We saw the successful amalgamation of the two congregations to form the United Orthodox Hebrew Congregation. A special joint general meeting of members of the two congregations took place in the Synagogue Hall, 12 Skoonder Street, on Monday night, the 8th of August, 1983, exactly 10 years ago, for the approval of the constitution of the newly formed congregation, Agudat Achim. And today, exactly 10 years later, we are witnessing the closing ceremony of the Vredehoek Shul. I am sure that there are many other congregants here today who, with heavy hearts and tearful eyes, many wonderful and unforgettable memories, are witnessing this very sad occasion. For today we are closing a shul in which in years gone by, parents, grandparents, and in some cases even great-grandparents faithfully attended and worshipped. A shul that once boasted with 5 shiurim per day, all well attended. A shul to which Jews flocked to daily because of its additional degree of holiness as the Bet HaMidrash, to recite the Kaddish in memory of parents and other loved ones. A shul which saw the splendor of great rabbis, the caliber of Rabbi Mervish, Rabbi Irushinsky, Rabbi N.L. Marcus. A shul where congregants enjoyed chazonas by famed chazonim like Reverend Rabinovitz, Reverend Lichterman, all of blessed memory. My dear fellow congregants, let today not be the end of the road. Let us take hands and face the future, even more united as before. Let us attend our shul regularly, work for and support our shul. Let us be faithful to our shul and our religion, like so many of our parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents who worshipped in this shul in the past. Our congregation has a deep-rooted and proud heritage in the community of Cape Town. Let this heritage continue to be suitably honored and severed.
those gentlemen who are honored to carry the Torah, please come forward.
light and truth to our leaders and counselors and direct them with your own good counsel. Strengthen the defenders of our Holy Land, grant them salvation, crown their efforts with victory, establish peace in the land and everlasting joy for its inhabitants. Remember our brothers, the whole house of Israel, and in all the lands of their dispersion. Speedily bring them to Zion, your city, and Yerushalayim, your holy dwelling place, as it's written in the Torah of Moses, your servant. Even if your outcasts are the world's end, from there the Lord God will gather you, from there will he fetch you and bring you to the land which your fathers occupied, and make you prosperous and numerous. Unite our hearts to love and respect you and to observe the precepts of your Torah. Speedily send us the Messiah to redeem those who long for your salvation. Reflect your majesty upon all the inhabitants of the earth, and let everyone declare Hashem, God of Israel, is King, and his dominion rules over all. Amen. Selah. Amen. Our God and God of our fathers, invoke in mercy thy blessing upon our country. Bestow thy blessing upon the state president and his ministers and counselors. Put in their hearts a spirit of wisdom and understanding, a spirit of counsel and fortitude, a spirit of knowledge and fear of the Lord, that they may uphold the peace of the country, advance welfare of the nation, and deal in justice and righteousness with all its citizens. Implant in the hearts of the inhabitants of this country of every faith and race a spirit of love and brotherhood, peace and amity. In their days and in ours, may our Heavenly Father spread a tabernacle of peace over all the dwellers on earth, and let us say, Amen.
Amen.
Leise to propose a vote of thanks.
Chief Rabbi, Mr. Mayor, Rabbi Brodman, visiting dignitaries and fellow congregants. While I'm saying these few words, I'm trying to think of a way to respond to this being the oldest member. I don't think he means his age. Before I say anything, I'd like to say but I'm sure you will all agree with me that our old shul today certainly looks grand, and that a special vote of thanks should go to all those congregants and staff and committee members who have worked so hard to see that our beloved old shul is closed in the manner in which it deserves. Now, of course, I'm suffering the fate of all last speakers, in that everybody else has said a lot of what they wanted to say, but nevertheless I would like to do it my way and maybe place things on a little bit more personal level. When I was asked to propose this vote of thanks, my first and immediate reaction was to say thanks, but no thanks. My whole life, my whole nature is one of building for the future, and I wanted to have nothing to do with the demolition of an institution which has meant so much to me and my family, and indeed the whole Jewish community of Cape Town over the last century or so, going back to the days of the Constitution Street Shul and beyond. Emotions and memories tend to take control at times like this. For instance, the last time I stood here on this very spot and made a speech was to receive this siddur presented to me by my very old family friend, the then President, the late Joe Talberg, and my guide and mentor for many years, Oscar Friedman. That was in 1948, a little bit before our Vice Chairman had his bar mitzvah. And I'm very happy to see Bessie Talberg here today and sharing this moment with all of us. I saw somewhere earlier. My mind immediately went back to the days when the men and boys in my family filled an entire pew. And I also recall with pride the last Sukkot which we celebrated here, when my grandson, who I think, subject to correction, is the only fifth generation member of this community, sat over there on my father's seat. It was a great day for me when he did that. However, all these memory flashes are just that. They are just memories. One must quietly and with due consideration look forward as well as back. One must consider both sides of an argument. There are always a number of routes open to the future. So in considering the future of Cape Town Central Jewry, and at the same time being true and faithful to all the things our memories present to us, and looking at the hard facts in the cold light of reality, the sad time has arrived when the chapter has to be closed and a new one opened. The question is, how do we remain faithful to our memories, to all those wonderful occasions which played themselves out within these four walls, to those fantastic characters who graced our lives, each in their own way? So many who served this congregation left each of us richer, whether we laughed or cried with them, or argued and fought. For instance, I so well remember meeting that rabbi for all seasons, Rabbi Marcus, on the beach, or taking children to a circus, or vociferously supporting the opposite side to me at an ice hockey game. Those who took the opportunity to meet him, as they say in the modern language, one-on-one, generally came away with a quite different view to the one which they started with. Similarly, our late beloved Cantor Lichterman, who enjoyed teasing us every year at Nila, and in the end never was a minute late when it came to the time to sound the shofar. He taught us all something about the joy of song and prayer. The lay leaders who so ably kept the fabric of this Bet HaMidrash together also figure strongly in our memories. For me also, I have such nice memories of Mrs. Jaffe, who I also saw here today. How many times we didn't joke together. Now, if I fell into the trap of mentioning names, then there's no telling where or when I would finish this vote of thanks. And many others would then want the privilege of doing the same. I would have to tell you about our shul's place in the history of District 6, which has gone largely unsung. I would have to explain about what happened to refugees who jumped ship in the docks and were only exercised in Hanover Street at night, and about how they learned their English. I would have to explain to you why there are brothers in this town who've got different surnames. And on a lighter note, I'd have to tell you about the Chinese Farfi school which long preceded the Casino Act. But I won't tell you of these things or these people. I will simply say that our first vote of thanks must surely go to those who preceded us in establishing this house of learning, meeting and worship. So what do our memories enjoin on us? Do they charge us with a duty? I submit they obligate us to perform at least two duties. Firstly, in these trying times for the diminishing Jewish community, our memories make it our responsibility to carry on the traditions of our fathers and their fathers before them. Our first duty is thus to uphold the strength of our Yiddishkeit and to see it never founders. Our second duty is of a more earthy nature. Our fathers laboured mightily to build this Beit HaMidrash. As an aside, you may not be aware of it, but this shul is actually a very fine example of Art Deco architecture. We have therefore an undeniable duty to see that the receipts arising out of the fruits of their labours are not dissipated, but rather are used for the benefit of the community. I may well be criticised for stating this view, but I cannot let this opportunity pass without solemnly charging the committee with the duty of seeing to the wise investment of our heritage. The dwindling Cape Town community needs direction. May the brave steps our congregation has taken over the years in promoting unity as evidenced in the initial amalgamation continue. And may our committee, which heretofore has shown public strength in the steps they have taken, be blessed with success doing the work which has to be done. And often it has to be done in the face of severe opposition, including on occasion from me. They must now proceed with all dispatch to activate the second part of the resolution taken at the last AGM. So it is in the spirit of our continuation into the future that I am able, with a clear conscience, to thank those who officiated here today and those who physically saw to the requirements of this day. Chief amongst them, on behalf of the community, I'd like to thank Chief Rabbi Cyril Harris for his inspiring address, Rabbi Brodman for his words of wisdom, Cantor Joel Lichterman, who, without knowing it, without meaning it, took us all back on a journey down memory lane. Thank you, John. Our choir, for those of you who haven't heard it before, continue to inspire us, and we want to thank them. The Ladies Guild have done a magnificent job, as you will see shortly, and they are always at hand when called upon. There are others, too numerous to mention, who've gone, who've had tasks to do today, which have made this afternoon the success that it is. And on behalf of all of us, I wish to thank them. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.